Yeah,
over the North Coast.
all the
Also,
networks are
this last
putting
hour comes to
word
us
for word because
from
it's
Fortuna
for the
Farmers
protesters and
Market.
against the banks.
Thank you,
And the way they
Fortuna
worded
Farmers Market,
it's
for
awesome.
joining
And the networks are putting it word for word on the screen and reading it. It's
Wow.
Fortuna
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
oh, yeah, yeah.
that's incredible.
Supporting the community radio station. Fortuna Farmers Market is held every Tuesday from 3 to 6 in the afternoon through the end of October. Located in downtown Fortuna at 10th and Main, there is fresh local produce from all reaches of the county, plus bakery goods and quality local crafts. Fortuna's Farmers Market, 3 to 6 tomorrow and every Tuesday through October.
What about the new
Another
guy?
hour of programming. This next
Dan,
hour of programming
what's his
comes to us
name?
in part from cool.
Dan.
Was he wearing a bow tie and a bowler?
Serving
Oh, no, not a bowler.
What?
No, I didn't have a hat on. No.
Specializing in individual and small
I was the only one with a hat.
firms,
Oh.
full
But I didn't wear it.
services available, licensed and bonded. by
So the
appointment only.
Republicans, I mean, what a race.
LFSB 707-943.
Yeah, oh, by the way, this was done, I guess it says in the 12th to 13th. We'll have another poll.
8:04, and you are tuned
this
into
week.
Monday Morning Magazine. And following
post-debate
Monday Morning
poll.
Magazine, we will be going to
And
alternative radio. And
was
today
everyone
it
at
features
that?
Paul
We were all there,
Uh,
but they didn't have an
Fuegos?
eighth chair for me. So I couldn't be in the
better.
debate.
No,
What?
Fuegos. He's gonna be
They didn't have an
doing
eighth
the
lavalier
speech
microphone
called
either.
We the
But what happened was you had
People.
one group that was the
That's
studio, and then the group sponsoring the thing. The studio gave it all for free, but they wanted to be perfect. It looked like Charlie Rose. So they had these expensive seats, all in an arc, individually lit, each person lavalier, and they didn't want to mess that up. But the people who didn't look me up, even though I'm at the FEC, they couldn't really influence it because they kind of messed up.
Well, there's a series of these that are gonna be happening though, right?
Yeah.
Monday Morning Magazine, Dennis Huber here, Marianne Norzer over there, playing that wonderful new Rycooter CD. I just, I can't get enough of that yet. There's so many cuts on there that I appreciate. And we're joined now by Andy Caffrey, a candidate for the new 2nd District, the district that runs from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Oregon border, and for which there is no incumbent, and many candidates. Now, Andy, let's get something straight right off the bat. Are you a Green Party candidate?
No, not this election.
And so, when you're asked the question of your party affiliation, what do you say?
Well, I'm registered Democratic right now, and that's what.
Well, then, there you are, Marianne.
Yeah, no, let me back up a little bit. I was involved in founding the Citizens Party in 1979 when we ran Barry Commoner, an environmentalist, and LaDonna Harris, a Native American woman, for president. That was essentially the first Green Party, and in fact, many of the European Greens came over to our convention and said, "You are the sister Green Party in the U.S." Citizens Party only lasted about 4 years, and then in 1985, the modern Green Party movement started. It wasn't actually called the Green Party at the time. In Berkeley, we had the East Bay Green Alliance. So I've been involved in Green Party politics for over 30 years. And what happened is I found a way to not just run as a Green, but to actually get elected with my Green politics intact, but by registering as a Democrat. Sort of like Arlen Specter tried to get reelected by registering as a Democrat.
Right.
He didn't become a Democrat, really. I'm not becoming a Democrat. But what I am doing, I think now, 30 years later, there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who would think Green politics is just great. So I'm organizing Green politics within the Democratic Party.
Well, yeah, no, that makes sense, because many people have pointed out how they feel that the Democratic mainstream has lost sight of those issues.
If they ever saw them.
Well,
I don't think they envisioned a post-industrialist society.
well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
If you're going to be representing us in Congress, how would you anticipate this post-industrial moment in our history?
Well, I think we're at an incredibly critical time. I've been working on the climate crisis for 30 years, and the reason I am running is because after trying everything I can imagine, working in Earth First, in third-party politics, nothing seems to have gotten the society to shift gears to deal with the climate crisis. And I've even found that the forest activists that I've worked with for decades haven't even read a book on the climate issue, much less gotten involved. So we're in a dire predicament. For me, it has to do with the polar ice. I started studying Antarctica when I noticed in Time magazine back in '95 that a chunk of ice the size of Delaware broke off.
Mhm.
So I started learning about ice ages and CO2 levels in ice ages, and I learned that in the last 2 million years, which is the ice age, that's the era in which our whole species evolved, there have been these cycles called glaciation periods. And they're roughly what we think of as the ice age, what we came out of 10,000 years ago, was one glaciation cycle of the ice age.
Okay.
And those cycles usually last roughly 100,000 years. And then there's an interglacial, which lasts about 10,000 years. And we are about 10,000 years into that. Well, now they can look 2.1 million years back in the historic record by looking at these ice cores, and they found that CO2 never got above 280 parts per million during the entire 2.1 million years. We're now at 390. Okay, so 280, and then you add 110 more. We're at 380. Well, every time it got to 280, it triggered an ice age, or at least an ice age kicked in. So the question is why? Well, the theory of ice ages has been, until last year, that it has to do with wobbling of the Earth, little eccentricities in the orbits. But when they found this ice record going back 2.1 million years, they found that that pattern of the 100,000 years on, 100,000 years off disintegrated. So they don't have a theory now. But I came up with a theory, which was that since you have a natural greenhouse effect that occurs in every interglacial, because as the millennia pass by, the soils lose their ability to, well, they lose their fertility, they lose their minerals, all kinds of things. So the plants become less and less robust and therefore absorb less and less CO2.
Mhm.
So you have a natural greenhouse effect in every interglacial. So my theory is that that natural greenhouse effect gets to a certain point where West Antarctica breaks up. Now, West Antarctica holds about 10% of the world's ice, and it's different from East Antarctica because East Antarctica is entirely over land, surrounded by mountains, so it's got a little bowl that it sits in. But West Antarctica, which is the size of Mexico, is just held in place by little islands. So it's got water underneath, and that's why these shells started breaking off. So if you look at what happened at the end of the last interglacial 120,000 years ago, you find that sea level went up 20 feet and then down at least 50 feet in 100 years. That's a 70-foot net change in 100 years, and the ice age was on. So my theory was that the sea level went up because West Antarctica's ice broke. And now I would add Greenland. Greenland probably broke up a part of it as well. And then that unleashed all of the ice that's piled up in Antarctica. In the center, it's 3 miles high. And so you have these ice shelves that ring Antarctica that hold that ice in. Picture a pancake. You pour the batter, and it goes down, but it also spreads out. Well, the ice moves too. It just moves about 1,000 feet a year. So what happened, and there's a scientist in New Zealand who came up with this in the 60s, is that the area of white at the south part of the world doubled in area. And that caused an additional reflectivity of solar energy into outer space, which caused the cooling that led to the ice age. So I got involved in this second phase of my climate activism to prevent the next ice age.
And that's almost taking us back to the question of, as a congressman, you know, how can you further this? How can you be effective on the ground with this understanding?
Well, it has to do with my temperament and my background as an Earth First organizer. Also, the fact that you can watch Congress on TV every day. So if you want to run for Congress, you can learn all about the members of Congress by just essentially going to Congress every day, which I've done. And, you know, I had a little bit of hope for Obama, but not much. I expected another Bill Clinton, and Clinton, you know, sent Al Gore to gut the Kyoto Treaty. So basically, I think what we can do is, well, okay, the other candidates and other politicians think of getting elected to Congress, and then they fight on the House floor. They try to get some bills there, they support bills, they debate and all that, but I don't think of it that way. That's just one part of the arena. I have a big toolkit of organizing tools. For me, I have 3,000 Facebook friends who are, well, about 1,000 of them are activists all around the world that I've worked with for decades. So I've got this sort of advisory team that I've had. And when I get elected, I'm going to, after every day in Congress, videotape myself telling my constituents what went on that day, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, what the good legislation is and the bad legislation, so that I'm bringing our constituency into Congress. And at the end of the week, I'll have about a 3-hour webcast where people can ask questions. I'm going to be starting a webcast soon as well, and in a few weeks I'll start my town hall meetings, which are going to be very unique, because I'm going to start the process of citizens writing the legislation. So people will come and you mention an issue that's of concern to you, and we form little groups, and we start to work on actually writing out what we think should be accomplished. And then next month I come back and people can be working on them in between the visits, but over the course of 7 or 8 months. At a certain point we'll bring lawyers in who can tweak it. But my idea is that I will be introducing legislation actually written by the 2nd District citizens. And so what I'll do is I'll go in there and I will raise hell via C-SPAN to the rest of the country to let them know what the real options are, which is the conversion that I propose in my New Green America proposals, which is a war effort to convert away from fossil fuels and nuclear as fast as humanly possible. And this should be done similarly to how we responded in World War II with a war effort. So I want President Obama to declare a national climate emergency and then announce that kind of a program to rebuild our infrastructure in this country in every community. Because if you think about the fastest way to eliminate greenhouse gases, it's to eliminate their consumption. And transportation is a big part of that. So if you don't have to get things from far away, and you get things made locally, you've eliminated a lot of greenhouse gases. So the goal is to rebuild the infrastructure so that everybody can get things as close to home as possible, which means rebuilding the entire infrastructure for all the kinds of products that will be in this new world. It's got to be sustainable, so not all of that stuff is coming back, but you know, all of your food production, your housing, your clothes, the rest of it should be made as close to home as possible. And so it's a huge work program. People talk about creating jobs, but I mean, there are some jobs that are bad and some that are good. I mean, Bush created a lot of jobs for the soldiers fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's jobs. And in fact, when they come back, they will have lost those jobs and they'll be among the unemployed.
Well, in fact, I think if many soldiers have gone on record saying that the only reason they are soldiers is because that was the only place they could find a job.
Sure, the economic draft.
Yeah. Well, okay.
The other part too is the reason I actually even started thinking about running was there were a couple of events that occurred. First, I read in Michael Moore's book, Dude, Where's My Country, a chapter called Liberal Paradise. And the liberal paradise is the USA. He has all kinds of statistics, like you have in your Harper's Index there, about Americans. And if you look at the whole agenda, except for some things like gay marriage, most Americans are actually liberal. And so that meant, well, there's a potential then for all these unregistered voters to be mobilized. And then in 2006, there were about 15 congressional races where the candidates won by 5,000 votes or less. To me, that means that the net roots organizers are the ones who made that difference. So I started thinking in terms of margin organizing. The way we can get corporatists out is to get organized year after year, not just at election time, to support community leaders, people that have respect for what they've done for the community, supported to be the candidates instead of the typical corporatist politicians. And that would require essentially just organizing to beat the margin by which a liberal loses to a centrist or a Democrat loses to a Republican, and that's the goal. So we have a unique district here where 59% say they will vote for a Democrat, 19% say they will vote for a Republican. So here the name of the game is winning the Democratic nomination, which is why I registered Democrat. And before the open primary, that meant that I had to organize half the votes that Thompson got in the primary. He got 80,000 in 2006. So that meant for me to win the whole thing, I had to organize 40,000 people out of about 500,000 voters. And considering how District 1, before it was changed, the two main industries were wine and marijuana, we have quite a potential to elect this kind of person. And then the idea was that if I can get elected, and I'm not a famous activist like a lot of people like Jim Hightower, then those kind of people can start to get supported by the community. And in 2014, we could have maybe 5, 6, or 7 people who have essentially a green orientation and definitely an anti-corporatist, anti-militarist perspective.
Okay. And I see, number 3 on this, platform is in capital letters, tax the rich.
Right.
We've been talking about that a little bit with the Occupy Everywhere stories that we've seen, you know, in all media right now. When you say tax the rich, what are you saying? Describe it in some detail.
Okay, well, I would recommend that people check out Robert Reich's book, Aftershock. It's his most recent book, just came out in paper. And in it, he shows how since 1980, I believe it's the top 1%, has acquired almost twice as much, percentage-wise, of the nation's wealth as it had in 1980. And what you see is a percentage of wealth owned by the entire rest of the population, all the workers of the nation, has dropped. So what has happened is that the rich have, like a vacuum cleaner, sucked up the buying power of the middle class. And that's why the economy is tanking. And until that money gets back out into the middle class, there aren't going to be any jobs created, because jobs are created by demand. I think the rich owe us for all of the damage that they have benefited from over the years. And I have no problem going back to Eisenhower's 92% upper tax rate. Now, there are to pay for this conversion, which one estimate is about $2 or $3 trillion total. I have other sources for the funds as well. So it's tax the rich, it's to retreat the empire, not just end the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, but actually pull back from those 150 nations where we have bases, and to end the war on drugs. So those are the 3 sources of funds that I see available for us. And I think most Americans, maybe not the war on drugs, but most Americans can get behind the idea that we should only be using our military and the money we pay for our military to protect Americans and their property here, not to protect spheres of influence for corporations.
Well, and a big part of that I see that has to be dealt with then is, what do you do with the virtual army, the private contractors, the ones that because we've privatized our military expenditures to a great extent, where what used to be done by U.S. forces is now done by corporations that are hired by the U.S. government.
Well, one of the tools that we have is that all of these things require energy, and in that sense money, which means if we cut off the funds, then they aren't there. And I think that's one of the things that I can do just as a lone person, is I can make the case that, you know, these are ridiculous expenditures, especially when everybody's suffering. I mean, when SSI has been reduced from the state portion that's funded over $80 in the last few years, I started seeing more of my friends losing their teeth, friends with broken glasses, and I'm sure because of the reduction in mental services, there have probably been more suicides. So I see literally who is killed and whose lives are ruined when they have these budget cuts. And the fact that we're spending, well, they call it the $3 trillion war. We can spend $3 trillion for a bogus war that kills 1 million people, but we can't do it to save our country and our planet? That's ridiculous. So that's the argument I'll make. And so every time one of these budgets comes up, I will be just going after it ferociously and informing the rest of the country about it.
And then reading farther down the list here, well, we've touched on the military, but corporate personhood. Can I just take a moment to say how much I appreciated that line that somebody put out last week about, I'll believe corporations are humans when Texas executes one of them?
Right. For me, if you can't be thrown in jail, you can't be a person.
Right. Yeah. Well, but what about it? I mean, this is tied directly to what you're describing, but what methods could be employed in your mind to abolish corporate personhood?
Well, there's, of course, move to amend the constitutional amendment, which I fully support. Well, I don't know if there's something specifically we can do legislation-wise, but we can certainly amplify the message. I mean, with the move to amend, we have to get, 37 states to pass it, to amend it. So
that's a tall order right now.
And there's a big education effort that has to happen. But every time something happens where the corporations get away with something that people couldn't get away with, that's when we have to jump on them and just point it out every time.
Someone locally recently said that another way to go at it would be to do non-binding resolutions. In other words, you could gauge public opinion.
I like that.
And without any retribution by government, you know, I mean, because we're entitled to speak our mind. And if it was a non-binding resolution, it wouldn't have any formal influence, but it could, over time, have influence simply by showing the will of the people.
Absolutely. I heard that was it last week when you guys were talking about it.
No.
Yeah, we kind of did that with the nuclear freeze movement.
Right.
We couldn't stop nuclear weapons from being made, but we could make a statement. And nuclear free zones, remember that, when all
Yeah.
these towns and
Yeah, Arcata
regions-
was at the forefront of that.
Yeah, I mean, you do what you can, but the point is, we have to start to mobilize ourselves and get focused. And that's why I have these proposals. Dennis is looking at my flyer, and I have this list of proposals I call New Green America. And this is because I am running outside of the Green Party context. If you're a Green Party candidate, you're kind of, well, not necessarily bound, but you're expected to support the Green Party platform. Well, if you're not running in the Green Party, how do folks know that they can trust you to be doing the same kind of
Right.
thing? So what I've done is taken the major issues that progressives and liberals and libertarians and all kinds of people have been fighting or fighting against and fighting for, depending upon what it is, and put them together in a set of proposals. So you can go, called New Green America, so you can go to any independent and say, how many of these do you support? Do you support fighting for the climate as threat number one? Do you support rebuilding of America's infrastructure around bioregions and sustainability? How about ending the empire, or are you just for ending the two wars? So this is a way that other candidates can be supported the closer they are to this sort of green perspective.
Mhm. Well, so let's talk for a moment about the campaign itself. It's, you know, I mean, we have a lot of candidates for this seat, and to my way of thinking, it's way early. I realize that as a candidate, it's not, but as a voter having to listen to the candidates, you know, I wonder, how are we gonna get through this for the next 9 months? What's your strategy? What's your plan for building a campaign over between now and June?
Well, again, going back to 2006 when I started thinking about this margin organizing, I was at the point where I realized that all of the other options for dealing with the climate were closed. You had both Clinton and Obama, who were basically preventing any international treaties from being signed, and Bush, of course, just abandoned it. So the international pressure is not going to change the United States' behavior. During the Bush administration, to their amazing credit, hundreds of this country's governors and mayors came together to form an organization to reduce the fossil fuels despite the Bush administration. However, despite the great work they're doing, and in some places they're going to be fossil fuel emission free in 10 years, 2020, that's great, but you look at what actually has to happen, and well, I'm presuming, well, I mean, I should have said something earlier, which is the reason I'm doing this is because there are ways of measuring the urgency of the climate crisis. In 1990, David Suzuki reports that the United States EPA, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the Woods Hole Research Institute came out with reports about how much we had to reduce our fossil fuel emissions and how fast. And all three of them came out with numbers between 55 and 80% by 2000 or 2005. Now instead we went up. And since that time, we've learned that these estimates underestimated it.
Right.
Well, just because we didn't respond doesn't mean the deadline still isn't 80% by 2005,
Right.
which is why I'm claiming we have to do it as fast as humanly possible. We're way past the deadline. Let's see, so what's the other part?
Well, we were trying to describe your efforts over the next 9 months. What kind of campaign are you building? We're running down to the bottom of the hour, so
Okay.
I wanted to
Well,
make sure people knew
basically,
how to connect with your
yes.
campaign.
Well, they can connect with me at caffreyforcongress.org or Facebook. But the way I can win, and the way I will win, is combining grassroots organizing with the netroots to reach as many people, say with my web videos, as I would reach if I had $1 million and bought TV time.
Mhm.
So that's the goal. Can we reach as many people with our own organizing and the internet as the millionaires can reach? So my campaign is built around that kind of a project, which is why I spent so much time on the internet and people haven't seen me going around here. And I've hired a team of professional consultants called Triumph Political, and they did a poll for me, and we've just done it, or we're about to do a second one. And in the poll, it shows that I'm in third place. It's an interesting poll. It's a poll, the first poll done of the new 2nd District voters. And it's who you would vote for now. And of course, a large number are undecided, 82% are undecided. So the numbers are pretty small, and they don't really mean a lot, but they do kind of show a few things. One, Jared Huffman's first place, but he only has 9% of the vote. Now, he's the assemblyman for the whole southern part of the district, so 250,000 people know about him. So he should be getting much higher than 9%. He's getting less than 1 out of 5 voters who know him. Second place is Susan Adams with 3%. I'm in third with 2%. Norman Solomon's in fourth with 1%. Stacey Lawson and Tiffany Renee fifth with tied at 0.5%. That's pretty interesting because I already have more support than Norman Solomon does with his 200,000 votes, $200,000, and I'm just now making my extension into the community.
Yeah, and then, to be fair, we have to mention that since this poll, there's been a Republican candidate that stepped forward. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
There's a total of 8. 6 of them are from south of Santa Rosa. So I'm the only one with any activist experience up here from north of Santa Rosa. So I consider myself the North Coast choice. And then you have Dr. Courtney, who's also from up here.
Oh, right. And he's not listed here on this.
Yeah, the poll was done before he came in.
Okay. Well, we're all but there, Andy. Let's give last words and keep people, give people the information so that they can keep track of your activities and join you if they're so desiring.
Yeah, well, I am planning to set up these community meetings where we start to work on legislation. So if you're interested in hosting me for that, give me a call at 923-2114. And my website is different from anybody else's. Instead of just listing how I feel about issues, and I do have my position on over 100 issues up there, I'm also going to educate people about why I have those positions. So I have videos up of Lester Brown talking about the need to reduce fossil fuel emissions, Naomi Klein, shock doctrine, John Perkins, economic hitman. So you can learn all kinds of things there, and that's part of the process. I'll have videos up about corporate personhood, legalizing marijuana, and the rest of it. And the other thing is, regarding marijuana, I am a 215 patient. So I'm going to be fighting for my right to take my medicine in D.C., and that makes me unique among the candidates. And I am willing to get arrested as a congressman in D.C. to get the medical marijuana message out there and to keep it strong.
Well, by the looks of the federal government, you might get that chance, Andy.
Yeah. So the website is Caffrey, that's C-A-F-F-R-E-Y, for Congress.org. And I look forward to seeing you at those meetings.
We've been speaking with Andy Caffrey, congressional candidate for the newly formed 2nd District. One of many candidates. We're glad that you took time to come on the air and let us know how you're looking at this race, Andy, and we look forward to having you back before the election.
Thank you very much, Dennis. My pleasure.
Take care. We're going to hand it over to Mary Ann, and we're going to let her take care of KMUD's business, and then we'll be back with the conversation about supporting our local schools.
This is what's really scary. 1992 to 2005, the orange is the area of Greenland that's melting.
Yeah, I've been keeping up on it. That's right.
It's terrible.
It's almost fait accompli.
It is 8:31.
That's 15
I
years.
have burn day information and weather for you before we go
Just
back
13
to
years.
Monday Morning Magazine.
That only goes up to 2005. 6 years
Effective
later.
October 3rd, the residential
accelerating.
loan
That's
suspension has been
2005.
lifted in Humboldt, Delmore, and
Yeah.
Western County.
Good morning.
Several trillion.
Today is
Let me make
not
room.
Mr. Burn Day. Further information, you can call
We have time to get ready because we do the weather and surf report. Ladies first.
Mike.
Do you want to be on that side?
I think Mike is gonna talk to her.
Yeah, that's fine. We have room for.
You stay?
More information.
Oh, no,
on
you
this,
leave?
no.
Okay.
We have weather from the National Weather Service for today, Monday, October.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
You're welcome, Dennis. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Next week it's Dr. Courtney, I think.
Yeah, I heard his concert wasn't really, he didn't announce actually.
That's fine. I've got you some news. No, I heard, yeah, it wasn't as well attended as they'd hoped. But it was a wedding too, for God's sake.
No, that was so weird.
I'll be right back to you guys.
Heavy at times in the morning, we'll have highs in 62.
Are you guys local? Are you guys local?
Yeah.
Also maybe early times in the morning.
What's your name?
Highs along
Rupta,
the
I'm
coast,
Andy.
59 to 61.
Nice to meet you. I'm running for Congress, so appreciate it.
Tonight
What's wrong
inland, mostly
Check out my
cloudy,
flyer.
rain showers likely in the evening, then chance of rain showers after midnight, lows around 50. Tonight along the coast, mostly cloudy with rain showers likely in the evening. Also, All right, extended forecast, inland, Tuesday, mostly cloudy in the morning, Wednesday and partly cloudy with a slight chance of rain showers. Wednesday and Thursday, partly cloudy, Friday through Sunday, mostly cloudy with that slight chance of rain.
If you can
Inland
just
high
get
61 to 82.
some of these
inland low
discussed.
42 to 55.
If you can just get some of these
Along the
issues
coast, partly
Well, that's the
discussed.
point of having that like it is. It is already getting people to
Then
discuss
becoming
them.
partly
Yeah,
cloudy
it
with a
is,
slight chance of rain through the day.
I mean,
Wednesday and Thursday,
let's
partly
take
cloudy.
openly
Friday through Sunday,
legalizing
mostly
marijuana
cloudy
is
with a slight
great,
chance of rain.
but what do
Along
we
the
do with
coast
our
high,
community?
59 to 74.
What do you mean with our community?
We gotta
Lows
be
45
broke.
to 57.
You mean if it's legalized?
Temperatures
I don't think so. I think we go
for
with
the
the
area today.
connoisseur
Otherwise
level.
expected
You know, like we have the Haagen-Dazs.
65 degree, low
It's
to
more
mid
expensive,
50, and high to low
but it's a premium.
67. McKinleyville see a high
You know,
today
when
of
you travel in the
62
world, there are
degrees, low to
countries
high to
that
50,
don't
and
spend
62
what
high to
we
low.
do
Eureka's
on
looking
some
about
of the
the
things
same,
we
62
spend
high
obscene
today,
amounts of money on.
51 low tomorrow.
And they have very
and
nice
62
societies.
high tomorrow.
And
Fort Bragg.
Do I get this, Andy?
Yeah.
High today, 51.
I'm gonna be putting them in the
63
boxes.
high tomorrow. Ukiah,